Now let's begin. Drew Leon stood in the parking lot of Pinewood High, watching the last yellow bus pull away into the November dusk. He'd stayed late grading essays, finding comfort in the routine. The janitor's keys jingled somewhere in the building behind him. In 2 days, it would be Thanksgiving. In 2 days, his daughter Sophie would spend the holiday eating turkey bones from a garbage can while 23 people feasted 15 feet away. But he didn't know that yet. He climbed into his aging Honda Civic, 12 years old, still reliable, and headed home to the small craftsman house he'd bought before Sophie was born. Before Miranda's family made it clear that a high school history teacher's salary wasn't enough. Before everything shifted. The house was dark when he arrived. Miranda's BMW was gone. Again, Drew found the note on the kitchen counter, written in his wife's precise handwriting. Took Sophie to Mother's for dinner. Leftover meatloaf in fridge. He crumpled the paper slowly, feeling the weight of what their marriage had become. They'd met 8 years ago at a charity fundraiser where Miranda was volunteering. She'd been different then, warm, laughing at his jokes about accidentally teaching the French Revolution instead of the American one to a class of confused freshmen. She'd loved that he could quote Howard Zinn and make history come alive. Her parents, Margaret and Carl Turner, had smiled tightly through the wedding, their disapproval hanging in the air like expensive perfume. The Turners owned Turner and Associates, a prestigious commercial real estate development firm that had shaped half the city's skyline. Carl was old money, Margaret was older money. Their daughter marrying a teacher with a state university degree had been, in Margaret's words, a phase. 7 years later, it was clear Miranda had started agreeing with them. Drew heated the meatloaf and ate standing at the counter, reading through Sophie's recent drawings she'd left on the table. Stick figures of a family. Him tall with his messy brown hair, Sophie small with pigtails, Miranda with yellow crayon hair. They were holding hands. The drawing was titled My Family, in Sophie's 6-year-old scrawl. His phone buzzed. Miranda, staying at Mother's tonight. Sophie too. See you tomorrow. Drew stared at the message. The third night this week. He texted back. Okay. Tell Sophie I love her. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response came. Drew walked to his home office, a converted bedroom lined with books. His laptop sat open to chapter 12 of the manuscript he'd been working on for 3 years. A book about ordinary people who changed history through small acts of defiance. His agent said it had potential, but needed work. The advance had been modest. Margaret had laughed when she'd heard the amount. $40,000? Darling, we spend that on a weekend in Aspen. He tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out the stack of documents he'd been avoiding. Credit card statements, all in Miranda's name. Charges at restaurants he'd never been to, shopping trips to stores he couldn't afford, spa treatments every week. When he'd mentioned it last month, Miranda had snapped. My parents give me an allowance. It's family money. You wouldn't understand. That was the thing about the Turners. They made you feel small without raising their voices. Margaret did it with carefully arched eyebrows and comments about adequate housing. Carl did it by never quite remembering Drew's name, calling him Dean or Dave at family gatherings. Miranda's younger brother, Austin Turner, did it by asking Drew when he was going to get a real job. Drew had endured it for Sophie. For the little girl who still believed her daddy hung the moon, who listened raptly to his stories about ancient civilizations and brave revolutionaries. He'd thought love could outlast contempt. He was beginning to realize he'd been wrong. The next afternoon, Drew picked Sophie up from the Turner mansion, a sprawling estate in Blackwood Hills where the houses had names instead of numbers. The gate code had been changed again. He had to call the intercom. It's Drew. Here for Sophie. A pause. Then Margaret's voice, cool as November rain. She's not ready yet. I'm 15 minutes early. I'll wait. Another pause. The gate buzzed open. Sophie ran out 20 minutes later, her backpack bouncing. She threw herself into Drew's arms with the force of a small hurricane. Daddy, Grandma bought me new shoes, but they pinch and Mom says I have to wear them anyway, and I told them I wanted my sneakers, but... Breathe, sweetheart. Drew kissed the top of her head. She smelled like the lavender soap Miranda's mother kept in the guest bathrooms. Margaret appeared at the doorway, immaculate in cream cashmere. Drew, Miranda's staying for dinner. Again. I see. She needs support right now. This situation with you two is very stressful for her. Drew set Sophie down, kept his voice level. What situation? Margaret's smile could have cut glass. Marriage is difficult when one partner has limited means. It creates tension. Sophie tugged his hand, oblivious to the subtext. Drew nodded once and led his daughter to the car. As they drove away, Sophie chattered about her day. Grammy said I should call you Dad, not Daddy, because I'm getting too old. Is that true? You can call me whatever feels right to you, Sophie. Grammy says a lot of things. Sophie kicked her new shoes off. These really do pinch. Drew glanced in the rearview mirror. His daughter was staring out the window, her small face thoughtful beyond her years. Hey, Soph. You know you can always tell me if something's wrong, right? I know, Daddy. But there was something in her voice that made his chest tighten. That evening, Drew made Sophie's favorite dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce and garlic bread. They ate at the small kitchen table, Sophie telling him about her teacher Mrs. Chun and the class hamster named Alexander the Great. Because you said Alexander conquered lots of places, so I told Mrs. Chun we should name the hamster that, and she said that was very clever. Pride swelled in Drew's chest. That is clever. After dinner, they built a fort in the living room using couch cushions and blankets. Drew read her 3 chapters from the Chronicles of Narnia before she fell asleep against his shoulder. He carried her to bed, tucking her in with her favorite stuffed elephant. As he pulled the door closed, Miranda's headlights swept across the house. She came in quietly, kicking off designer heels in the entryway. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her makeup still perfect even at 9 p.m. She asleep? Just now. Drew followed her to the kitchen. We need to talk about Thanksgiving. Miranda poured herself white wine from a bottle he hadn't bought. What about it? Your mother's been vague about the time. What should I bring? She took a long sip, not meeting his eyes. Actually, Mother thought it might be better if it was just family this year. The words landed like a punch. I'm your husband. You know what I mean. The extended Turner family. It's already 23 people. The table's full. Sophie's going. Sophie's a Turner. You. Miranda trailed off. What? Say it. She set the glass down hard. This isn't easy for me either, Drew. Do you know what it's like having my mother constantly point out how much better Charlotte's husband is doing? How Frederick Charles just made partner at his law firm. How Darren Proctor's tech startup just got valued at $50 million. I don't care about Frederick Charles. Well, maybe you should. Miranda's voice rose. Maybe you should care that I have to make excuses for why we can't vacation in Europe, or why Sophie goes to public school, or why you're still teaching the same classes you were teaching when we met. Drew felt something break inside him, clean and final. Is that what you want? A husband who makes more money. I want a husband who wants to make more money, who has ambition, who doesn't act like being content is some kind of virtue. I love teaching, Miranda. I love our daughter. I thought I loved you. She flinched. Don't be dramatic. Then don't uninvite me from Thanksgiving. He kept his voice steady. That's my daughter. I have a right to be there. It's Mother's house. Her rules. Then maybe Sophie and I will have Thanksgiving at home. Together. Miranda's laugh was bitter. You can't afford the kind of meal she's used to. She's 6 years old. She doesn't care if the turkey costs $200. That's exactly the problem, Drew. You don't understand what she deserves. What I deserve. She grabbed her wine and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind her with a decisive click. Drew stood in the kitchen alone, surrounded by Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator and the remnants of their spaghetti dinner. He'd built a good life here. A simple one, maybe, but full of love and meaning. It had never been enough for Miranda. And now, apparently, it wasn't enough for her family either. He thought about Sophie sleeping upstairs, innocent and trusting. He thought about the way Margaret looked at her sometimes, appraising, calculating, like she was a Turner first and his daughter second. Drew walked to his office and opened his laptop. He started a new document, titled it Notes, and began typing everything he could remember about the Turner family. Their business dealings. The conversations he'd overheard. The way Carl's eyes went cold when someone mentioned environmental regulations or zoning laws. He didn't know why he was doing it yet. Just that instinct told him he'd need ammunition eventually. The Turners had declared war. They just didn't know it yet. Chapter 2. The week before Thanksgiving, Drew noticed the changes. Sophie came home from Margaret's house with new clothes. Expensive dresses with tags he recognized from boutiques in the historic district. When he asked about them, Sophie shrugged. Grammy says my clothes from Target are embarrassing. Drew felt anger simmer in his gut. There's nothing wrong with your clothes, sweetheart. Grammy says people judge you by what you wear. Is that true? He knelt down to her level. Some people do. But the people worth knowing don't care about labels or price tags. They care about who you are inside. Sophie considered this, then hugged him tight. I like my Target clothes. They're comfy. But the next day, Miranda picked her up in a new outfit, a velvet dress with patent leather shoes. When Drew asked about it, Miranda's response was clipped. Mother's taking her to the country club for lunch. She needs to look presentable. She's 6. Exactly. This is when habits form. Drew watched his daughter climb into Miranda's BMW, uncomfortable in clothes meant for display rather than play. He thought about calling his lawyer friend, Cody McConnell, who'd handled their house closing years ago. But lawyers cost money Drew didn't have in abundance. Instead, he went to school and taught his 10th graders about the French aristocracy before the Revolution, about excess and inequality, about the breaking point when ordinary people decided enough was enough. One student, a sharp kid named Marcus, raised his hand. Mr. Leon, do you think revolutions still happen today? Different kinds, Drew said. Not always violent. Sometimes revolution is just one person deciding not to accept injustice anymore. Like Rosa Parks? Exactly like Rosa Parks. After school, Drew drove to the Turner & Associates headquarters downtown, a gleaming tower of steel and glass. He'd never visited Carl's office before. Never had reason to. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset, looked up with practiced politeness. Can I help you? I'm here to see Carl Turner. I'm his son-in-law. Her expression shifted slightly. Do you have an appointment? No, but Mr. Turner doesn't see people without appointments. I can schedule something for next month. Tell him Drew Leon is here about his granddaughter. She hesitated, then spoke into her headset. A minute later, she pointed to the elevators. 20th floor. His assistant will meet you. The 20th floor was all marble and mahogany. Carl's assistant, an efficient-looking woman named Joan Elliott, led Drew to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Carl sat behind a desk the size of Drew's kitchen table, silver-haired and imposing in a navy suit that probably cost more than Drew's monthly salary. He didn't stand. Drew, this is unexpected. I won't take much of your time. Drew remained standing, refusing to sit in the visitor's chair like a supplicant. I want to know why my daughter and I aren't invited to Thanksgiving. Carl's expression didn't change. That's Margaret's domain. I don't involve myself in social planning. This isn't social planning. This is family. Is it? Carl leaned back in his chair. You've been married to my daughter for 7 years. In that time, what have you contributed to this family beyond a granddaughter? The question hung in the air. Drew kept his voice level. I love your daughter. I'm a good father to Sophie. I have a career I'm proud of. A career. Carl's smile was thin. You make $48,000 a year teaching children who mostly don't care. You live in a house worth less than my wife's car. You have no prospects, no connections, no drive to improve your station. My station is fine. Your station is mediocre. And mediocrity, Drew, is contagious. Miranda is starting to realize that. Drew's hands curled into fists at his sides. What are you saying? I'm saying that Thanksgiving is for family who contribute to the Turner legacy. You don't. You're welcome to join us when you have something to offer beyond sentiment and good intentions. And Sophie is a Turner. She'll be there, of course. Margaret's already bought her a proper dress. The dismissal was clear. Drew turned to leave, then paused at the door. You know what's funny, Carl? I teach history. I teach about empires that fell because they forgot what actually mattered. They built everything on money and power and contempt for ordinary people. And every single one of them collapsed. Carl's expression flickered, just for a second. Then the mask returned. History is written by victors, Drew. And victors aren't usually high school teachers. Drew left before he said something he'd regret. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 10 minutes, breathing deeply, trying to control the rage. Then he pulled out his phone and called his oldest friend, Glenn Davies, who worked as a private investigator. Glenn, it's Drew. I need a favor. Anything, man. What's up? I need you to look into Turner & Associates. Quietly. Any irregularities, any complaints, anything that doesn't add up. Silence on the other end. Then, this about Miranda's family? Yeah. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that people who treat others like they're disposable usually have something to hide. And I'm thinking I want to know what it is. This could get messy. It's already messy. Glenn sighed. All right, give me a week. I'll see what I can find. Drew hung up and drove home. Miranda's car wasn't there. Another note on the counter. Taking Sophie shopping for Thanksgiving dress. Don't wait up. He crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. The Saturday before Thanksgiving, Drew took Sophie to the Children's Museum. They spent hours exploring exhibits about dinosaurs and space and ancient Egypt. Sophie was fascinated by the pharaohs. They were buried with all their treasure so they'd have it in the afterlife, she said, reading from a placard. That's silly. You can't take stuff when you die. No, you can't. So why did they care so much about gold and jewels? Drew smiled. Good question. Some people think having more makes them more important. But really, the pharaohs who are remembered are the ones who built things that lasted. Libraries, schools, things that helped people. Sophie nodded seriously. Like you teaching? His throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. Like that. They got ice cream afterward. Sophie's treat. She insisted, using the $5 Drew had given her for helping clean her room. She ordered chocolate chip and shared it with him, their spoons clinking against the paper cup. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always. How come we don't go to Grammy's house together anymore? Like, you and me and Mom. Drew chose his words carefully. Sometimes families go through hard times. Your mom and I are trying to figure some things out. Grammy says you're not. Sophie paused, licking her spoon. She uses a big word. Something. Compatible. Yeah. She says you're not compatible with our family. Drew's ice cream turned to ash in his mouth. What do you think? Sophie looked at him with those wise 6-year-old eyes. I think you're my daddy, and that makes you family. Grammy's wrong sometimes. He pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body against his chest, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo mixed with chocolate ice cream. I love you, Sophie. More than anything in the world. I know, Daddy. I love you too. When he dropped her off at the Turner mansion that evening, Margaret was waiting at the door. She watched Sophie run inside, then turned to Drew. Miranda tells me you made a scene at Carl's office. I asked a question. You embarrassed yourself and my daughter. Margaret's voice was ice. Thursday is Thanksgiving. Sophie will be here at 10 a.m. You are not invited. If you show up, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Drew held her gaze. She's my daughter. She's a Turner. Don't forget which one matters more. Margaret closed the door. Drew sat in his car, shaking with fury. He pulled out his phone and texted Miranda. We need to talk. Tonight. No response. He drove home and found Glenn's number in his recent calls. It rang 4 times before his friend picked up. I've got something, Glenn said without preamble. You're not going to like it. Tell me. Turner and Associates has been under investigation by the EPA for the last 6 months. Something about illegal dumping at their construction sites. There's also a sealed lawsuit from 2019, former employee claiming Carl cooked the books on a commercial development deal. It was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Drew's pulse quickened. Can you get details? I can try. But Drew, these people have lawyers. Good ones. Whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything. Yet. Just keep digging. When Miranda finally came home at 11 p.m., Drew was waiting at the kitchen table. She stopped in the doorway, still in her coat. I'm tired, Drew. Did you know your mother threatened to call the police on me if I come to Thanksgiving? She's protecting her family. I'm her family. You're the man who married her daughter and gave her a granddaughter. That's different. Drew stood slowly. When did you become them? The woman I married cared about more than country clubs and designer labels. The woman you married was young and stupid and thought love conquered all. Miranda's voice cracked. It doesn't, Drew. Love doesn't pay for Sophie's education or give her opportunities, or I provide for Sophie. She's happy. She's healthy. She's loved. She deserves more than enough. She deserves everything. According to your parents? Miranda's silence was answer enough. Drew felt the last thread of his marriage snap. Fine. Then let's make this official. File for divorce. But I'm getting custody of Sophie. You can't afford to fight me. My parents will hire the best lawyers. Try it. See what happens. Something in his tone made Miranda pause. What does that mean? It means I'm done being treated like I'm not good enough. It means you've chosen your family over ours. It means Sophie deserves better than people who measure her worth by her clothing labels. He walked past her to the guest room, closing the door behind him. Through the wall, he heard Miranda crying. A small part of him still ached for her. But the larger part, the part that had endured 7 years of contempt and condescension, felt nothing but resolve. Thursday was Thanksgiving, and Drew was going to be there, invited or not. Chapter 3. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and gray, threatening rain. Drew woke at 6 a.m. in the guest room, his mind already running through scenarios. He'd called Cody McConnell the night before, gotten advice about custody laws and parental rights. Miranda couldn't legally keep him from seeing Sophie on a holiday without a court order, which meant Margaret Turner's threat was empty. Probably. He showered, dressed in his best charcoal suit, the one he wore to parent-teacher conferences and weddings. Miranda was already gone, her car missing from the driveway. She'd left before he woke up, taking the few possessions she hadn't yet moved to her parents' house. The pre-divorce had already begun, quiet and inevitable. Drew made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching rain begin to spatter against the windows. His phone buzzed. Glenn Davies. Happy Thanksgiving. Got more information for you. I'm listening. Carl Turner's company is in deeper trouble than I thought. The EPA investigation is the tip of the iceberg. I found 3 more lawsuits that were settled quietly, all from subcontractors claiming they were defrauded. And here's the interesting part. Turner and Associates was bailed out by Carl's father-in-law in 2008. Without that injection of cash, they would have gone bankrupt during the housing crisis. So the Turner fortune is mostly Margaret's family money. Carl's been coasting on his wife's wealth for years while pretending he built the empire himself. Drew smiled grimly. That's useful. There's more. I talked to a buddy who works in city planning. Turner and Associates has been pushing for a massive redevelopment project in the Riverside district. They're trying to get the zoning changed from residential to commercial. If it goes through, they'll make millions. If it doesn't, they're overextended. Exactly. They've already bought up half the properties based on the assumption the zoning will change. If it falls through, they're sitting on tens of millions in residential property they can't develop. Drew filed this information away. When's the zoning board vote? Next month. December 15th. Thanks, Glenn. I owe you. Just be careful. These people fight dirty. Drew hung up and stared at his coffee. The Turner family had spent years making him feel small, inadequate, worthless. They'd poisoned his marriage, alienated his daughter, and now they were trying to erase him from Thanksgiving entirely. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated him. Drew had been researching and writing about power structures his entire adult life. He understood how they worked, how they fell apart. The Turners thought money and social status made them untouchable. He was about to teach them a history lesson they'd never forget. At 9:30 a.m., Drew got in his Honda and drove to Blackwood Hills. The rain had intensified, turning the road slick. He pulled up to the Turner mansion's gate and pressed the intercom. No answer. He pressed it again, longer this time. Margaret's voice crackled through. I told you not to come. I'm here to see my daughter. You're trespassing. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. But you should know I've already called my attorney. And unless you have a court order barring me from seeing Sophie, you're preventing a father from accessing his child on a holiday. That won't look good. Silence. Then the gate buzzed open. Drew parked in the circular driveway behind a lineup of luxury vehicles. BMWs, a Mercedes, a Tesla, a Porsche. He recognized Austin Turner's red Corvette. He walked to the massive front door and rang the bell. Miranda answered, her face pale. Drew, please don't do this. Where's Sophie? Inside with everyone else. Then I'm coming inside. He stepped past her into the marble foyer. Voices drifted from the formal dining room. Laughter, conversation, the clink of crystal. The house smelled like roasted turkey and expensive wine. Drew followed the sounds. The dining room was exactly as he'd imagined. A table that could seat 30, set with china and silver that probably cost more than his car. 23 people sat around it, the Turner family in their Thanksgiving finery. Carl at the head of the table, Margaret opposite him. Austin and his wife Brittany Francis. Miranda's cousin Frederick Charles and his wife Amber Ross. Other relatives Drew recognized from weddings and funerals. They all looked up when he entered. Everyone except Sophie. She wasn't at the table. Drew's blood went cold. Where's my daughter? Margaret set down her wine glass delicately. Sophie was being fussy about her dress. She's in the kitchen with Joan. Joan Elliott? Your assistant. Someone needed to supervise her. She was disrupting the meal. Drew walked past the dining room, through the butler's pantry, into the massive kitchen. It was empty except for Joan, who stood at the sink washing dishes, and Sophie. His 6-year-old daughter sat on the floor in the corner, near the trash can, wearing her new velvet dress. Her face was streaked with tears. In her hands was a turkey bone, picked clean. She was eating scraps from the garbage. The sound that came from Drew's throat was something primal. Sophie looked up, saw him, and her face crumpled. "Daddy." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, scooped her into his arms. She buried her face in his neck, sobbing. "They said I couldn't eat with everyone because my dress got dirty and I was hungry, and Miss Joan said there weren't enough seats anyway, so I could eat the leftovers and—" "Chill. It's okay. I've got you." He turned to Joan Elliott, who looked stricken. "How long has she been here?" I was just following Mrs. Turner's instructions." Drew didn't wait for the rest. He carried Sophie back through the butler's pantry, into the dining room where 23 people sat with full plates and expensive wine, their Thanksgiving feast spread before them like a medieval banquet. Everyone was staring now. Drew looked at Margaret Turner. She met his gaze with cold calculation. He said 6 words. "You'll never see her again. Ever." Margaret's fork clattered to her plate. Miranda made a sound like a wounded animal. Carl half rose from his chair. Drew turned and walked out, Sophie clinging to him like a lifeline. Behind him, voices erupted, Miranda crying, Margaret shouting, chaos replacing the carefully curated perfection. He strapped Sophie into his car and drove away from the Turner mansion. She cried against her seatbelt, hiccuping sobs that broke his heart. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I ruined Thanksgiving." "No, sweetheart. You didn't ruin anything. Those people did." He reached back and squeezed her hand. "How about we go home and make our own Thanksgiving? Just you and me. With mac and cheese. With anything you want." They stopped at a 24-hour grocery store, one of the few open on the holiday. Drew bought macaroni and cheese, chocolate milk, and a small pumpkin pie. Sophie stayed close to him the whole time, still in her dirty velvet dress. At home, he helped her change into sweatpants and her favorite t-shirt with a dinosaur on it. They made mac and cheese together, Sophie standing on a step stool to stir the pot. They ate in the living room, watching Moana for the 100th time. Sophie fell asleep against his shoulder before Maui's first song ended. Drew carried her to bed, tucking her in with her stuffed elephant. He watched her sleep for a long time, her face peaceful now, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. Then he went to his office and opened his laptop. He started writing. Not the book about ordinary heroes. Something different. Something necessary. He wrote about child neglect. About families who valued appearance over humanity. About corruption masked by wealth. About men like Carl Turner who built empires on other people's money and pretended they were self-made. And he started making calls. First to Cody McConnell, leaving a voicemail. "I need to file for divorce and full custody. First thing Monday morning. Grounds are child neglect and endangerment." Then to Glenn Davies. "I need everything you can get on Turner and Associates. Every lawsuit, every EPA violation, every dirty deal. I don't care how you get it." Then to his literary agent and Kingston. "Remember that expose idea I pitched about corruption in commercial real estate? I'm writing it. And I have a subject family to profile." Finally, he called a number he'd saved months ago. A producer from a local investigative journalism show who'd reached out when Drew's first book got minor attention. "This is Drew Leon. We spoke last spring about education reform. I've got a different story for you. One about a prominent family engaged in fraud, environmental crimes, and child abuse." Interested? The producer was very interested. Drew hung up and looked at the calendar. 2 weeks. He'd said he was going to do something worse in 2 weeks. He was going to destroy the Turner family. Methodically, completely, using their own sins against them. And unlike them, he'd do it fairly. With truth. With evidence. With the law on his side. Because Drew Leon might have been just a history teacher. But history teachers understood something the Turners never would. Empires fell. Always. Eventually. It was just a matter of finding the right pressure point. And he'd found theirs. Chapter 4. The 55 missed calls started on day 13. Drew knew because he'd been counting. 13 days since Thanksgiving. 13 days since he'd walked out of the Turner mansion with Sophie. 13 days of silence from Miranda, from her family, from everyone except his lawyer. Then his phone exploded. It started at 7 a.m. on a gray December morning. Miranda's name flashed on the screen. Drew let it ring through to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. Between her calls, Margaret tried. Then Carl. Then Austin. then numbers Drew didn't recognize. By noon, he had 55 missed calls and 23 voicemails. He was teaching when the calls started, his phone on silent in his desk drawer. He didn't check it until lunch period, when he found his voicemail completely full. Drew sat in his empty classroom and listened to them in order. The first was Miranda, her voice shaking. "Drew, please call me back. It's important. It's about Sophie. And everything. Please." The second was also Miranda. "I know you're angry, but this is serious. My parents, there are reporters. Someone leaked, just call me. Please." By the fifth call, her voice had shifted from pleading to frantic. "Drew, whatever you did, you need to stop it. Now. They're saying Dad's company. Oh God, there are news vans outside their house. Please tell me this wasn't you." The later calls were from Margaret and Carl, their cultivated composure cracking. "Margaret, this is slander. We will sue you for everything you have, which admittedly isn't much, but we'll take your house and your pathetic car and make sure you never see Sophie." "Carl, I underestimated you. That was foolish. But if you think exposing us helps your daughter, you're wrong. Call me. We can negotiate." Drew deleted all 55 messages and opened his laptop. The news had broken that morning. Channel 7's investigative team had run the story during their sunrise broadcast. Turner and Associates under fire. Allegations of fraud, environmental crimes, and EPA violations. The reporter, a sharp woman named Violet Schaefer, had done excellent work. Drew had given her everything Glenn had uncovered, plus documents he'd found himself. Old news articles, public records, testimony from former employees that Glenn had tracked down. But the real bombshell was the child neglect angle. Violet had interviewed Joan Elliott, who'd been racked with guilt since Thanksgiving. She'd quit her job at Turner and Associates 3 days after the holiday and agreed to go on record. "I watched a 6-year-old eat scraps from a trash can while her grandmother hosted a lavish dinner 15 feet away," Joan said in the broadcast, her voice steady. "When I questioned Mrs. Turner, she said the child needed to learn her place." Those were her exact words. The segment included photos Drew had taken of Sophie that night, her tear-stained face, the dirty dress, the turkey bone. He'd hesitated before handing them over. But Sophie had asked him what was happening, and he'd explained in simple terms that Grammy and Grandpa had broken rules and hurt people. "Like bullies?" Sophie had asked. "Exactly like bullies. Then they should get in trouble. At school, bullies have to sit in timeout." From the mouths of babes. Drew's phone rang again. This time it was Cody McConnell. "You watching the news?" Cody asked. "I am now. It's everywhere." CNN picked it up. So did the Times. The story has national legs. Wealthy family abuses granddaughter while fighting environmental violations. It's perfect outrage bait. I just wanted the truth out. Well, the truth is burning through social media like wildfire. The Turners are trending on Twitter. Not in a good way. Cody paused. "Miranda's lawyer called me this morning. They want to settle the divorce quickly and quietly." "No. Drew. No settlement. I want full custody of Sophie. I want Miranda to admit what happened. And I want child support from her, not the other way around. She's got access to Turner money. I want Sophie to benefit from it since the Turners spent so much time telling me how important money is." Cody whistled low. "You're going for blood. I'm going for justice." "Fair enough. I'll draft the demands. But Drew, be prepared. They're going to fight dirty. Let them try." That afternoon, Drew picked Sophie up from school. She bounded out of her first-grade classroom, pigtails bouncing, her backpack covered in dinosaur stickers. "Mrs. Chun said I did really good on my spelling test. I got all 10 words right." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." He knelt down for a hug. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" "Absolutely." They went to the same ice cream parlor where they'd shared chocolate chip 2 weeks ago. Sophie ordered strawberry this time, her mood bright and untroubled. Drew watched her eat, marveling at a child's resilience. "Daddy, why did Grandma and Grandpa do bad things?" Drew chose his words carefully. Sometimes people get so focused on seeming important that they forget to be good. Does that make sense? Sophie licked her spoon thoughtfully. "Mrs. Chin says being good is more important than being smart or rich or pretty. Mrs. Chin is very wise. Will I see Grammy and Grandpa again?" Drew felt his chest tighten. Despite everything, Sophie had loved her grandparents. She was too young to understand the depth of their cruelty. "Maybe someday. But right now, you're going to stay with me. Is that okay?" Sophie nodded, then put down her ice cream. Daddy? I heard kids talking at school. They said Grammy hurt me, but she didn't hit me or anything. There are different kinds of hurt, sophomore. Sometimes people hurt you by making you feel small or unimportant. That's what happened. Oh, Sophie thought about this. That makes me sad. Me too. But I have you. So it's okay. Drew pulled her into a hug, feeling her small arms around his neck, and wondered how he'd gotten so lucky to have this person in his life. When they got home, Miranda's BMW was parked in the driveway. Sophie tensed. Is Mommy mad at us? Mommy's probably upset. But not at you. Never at you. Miranda was sitting on the front steps, still in her work clothes, a designer suit that probably cost a month of Drew's salary. Her eyes were red from crying. Sophie, baby. Sophie ran to her mother, and Miranda scooped her up, sobbing into her daughter's hair. Drew unlocked the front door and gestured for them to come inside. I'll make hot chocolate, he told Sophie. You want to watch cartoons? Sophie nodded eagerly. Miranda set her down, and Sophie ran to the living room. In the kitchen, Miranda leaned against the counter, her perfect composure shattered. They're saying I'm an unfit mother. Are they wrong? She flinched. I never knew. About Thanksgiving. Mother told me Sophie was in the kitchen because she'd spilled on her dress. That Joan was helping her clean up. I didn't know she was. I would never. You weren't in the kitchen once during that entire meal? Miranda's silence was answer enough. Drew made hot chocolate, keeping his hands busy to avoid saying something he'd regret. What do you want, Miranda? I want to know if you did this. If you went to the press. He met her eyes. Yes. Why? To punish me. To protect Sophie. And to stop your family from hurting other people. He poured hot chocolate into Sophie's favorite mug. Did you know about the EPA violations? The fraud lawsuits? I know. Maybe. Dad doesn't talk about business with me. But you knew something was off. Miranda's shoulders sagged. I knew Dad was stressed. That money was tighter than usual. But I thought it was just the market, or I don't know. I didn't ask questions. Because asking questions would mean admitting your family isn't perfect. They're still my family. And she's ours. Drew gestured to the living room where Sophie was singing along to a cartoon. When are you going to choose her over them? Miranda's face crumpled. I don't know how. They're all I've ever known. Without them, I don't know who I am. Drew felt a flicker of pity. Then he remembered Sophie eating from a trash can. Figure it out. Fast. Because Cody's filing for full custody on Monday. You can fight it, but you'll lose. Or you can agree to shared custody with specific conditions. What conditions? Sophie stays primarily with me. You get supervised visitation until you prove you can put her first. No contact with your parents until they've completed court-mandated family therapy and made amends to Sophie. And you start paying child support. Miranda laughed bitterly. With what money? My trust fund is controlled by my parents. If I go against them, then get a job. You have a business degree you've never used. I can't just. You can. Or you can choose the Turners over your daughter. Again, Miranda stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I loved you, you know, before everything got so complicated. I know. I loved you too. Is it too late? Drew handed her the hot chocolate to take to Sophie. For us? Yes. But not for you and Sophie. Be her mother. Really be her mother. That's all I'm asking. Miranda took the mug with shaking hands and walked to the living room. Drew listened to Sophie's delighted squeal. Mommy's staying? And Miranda's quiet. Just for a little while, baby. His phone buzzed. Glenn Davies. Turn on Channel 7. The EPA is holding a press conference. Drew found the remote and switched on the TV in the kitchen. An EPA official stood at a podium, flanked by serious-looking people in suits. After reviewing evidence provided by whistleblowers and investigative journalists, the Environmental Protection Agency is filing formal charges against Turner and Associates for multiple violations of federal environmental law. Additionally, the Justice Department will be pursuing fraud charges related to falsified environmental impact reports. The camera panned to questions from reporters. Someone asked, what are the potential penalties? Millions in fines. Possible jail time for executives found responsible. Drew felt grim satisfaction. The empire was crumbling. Behind him, Miranda appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. That's my father. Yes. They could go to prison. Yes. She sank into a kitchen chair. What have you done? What someone should have done years ago. I stopped them. Miranda looked at him with something that might have been respect or horror or both. You're not who I thought you were. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look. Chapter 5. The Turners hired Patricia Donnelly, the most aggressive attorney in the state. She was known for defending white-collar criminals and making witnesses disappear through intimidation and settlements. Her first move was to file a motion to seal all records related to the Turner case, citing potential harm to ongoing business operations. It failed. Her second move was to threaten Drew directly. She showed up at Pinewood High during his planning period, her Louboutin heels clicking against linoleum floors. Principal Harris escorted her to Drew's classroom personally, looking apologetic. "Mr. Leon, this is Patricia Donnelly. She says it's urgent." Drew looked up from grading essays. "I have nothing to say without my attorney present." "Smart." Patricia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not here to discuss the case. I'm here to make you an offer." "I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet." She sat on the edge of a student's desk, uninvited. "The Turners are willing to pay you handsomely. $500,000 to retract your statements to the press and admit you fabricated the Thanksgiving incident out of spite." Drew set down his red pen slowly. "Get out of my classroom. Think about what that money could do for Sophie. Private school, college fund, a better house. Out. Now." Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt. "You're making a mistake. The Turners have resources you can't imagine. They will bury you in legal fees. They will drag this out for years. Your daughter will spend her childhood in courtrooms instead of playgrounds. Then they'll spend it in prison. Fair trade." Patricia's smile turned predatory. "We'll see about that." She left, her perfume lingering in the air, expensive and cloying. Drew texted Cody immediately. "Turner's lawyer just tried to bribe me at school. $500,000 to recant." Cody's response was instant. "They're desperate. Document everything. This helps our custody case." That evening, Drew sat with Sophie doing homework, practicing her letters, the tip of her tongue poking out in concentration. His phone buzzed constantly. Messages from reporters requesting interviews, from former students offering support, from strangers who'd seen the news. One message stood out. "From in Kingston, his literary agent. 3 publishers want to meet with you about the Turner story. One is offering a 6-figure advance site on scene. Call me." Drew stared at the message. 6 figures. That was more than he'd make in 2 years teaching. "Daddy? You're not helping." Sophie poked his arm. "Sorry, sweetheart. Let me see your E." She'd written it backward. He gently guided her hand through the correct formation, thinking about money and principles and how sometimes they aligned perfectly. The week before the zoning board vote, Carl Turner called Drew directly. "We need to talk. Man to man." "I don't think so. Please." The words sounded foreign in Carl's mouth. "Not about the case. About Sophie." Drew's grip tightened on the phone. "What about her? Can we meet? Neutral location. Public. Just 10 minutes. Against his better judgment, Drew agreed. They met at a coffee shop downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. Carl looked diminished in casual clothes, khakis and a polo instead of his usual $1,000 suits. His silver hair was disheveled. He'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. "Thank you for coming." Drew said nothing. Carl ordered black coffee, sat across from Drew at a small table by the window. "I owe you an apology." "Too late." "I know, but I need to say it anyway." Carl wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "I was wrong about you. About what matters. About how I treated you and Sophie. And Miranda? And Miranda." Carl's voice cracked. "I raised her to value the wrong things. Money, status, appearance. I thought I was preparing her for the world. Instead, I turned her into someone who'd let her daughter eat from garbage because she was too afraid to defy her mother." Drew felt a flicker of something, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in 3 days, the zoning board votes on our Riverside development. If it fails, Turner and Associates goes bankrupt. We'll lose everything. Margaret's family fortune is already tied up in legal defenses thanks to your expose." "Good. I'm not asking for mercy on that front. We deserve what's coming." Carl met his eyes. "But I'm asking you to let Sophie know her grandfather before I go to prison. To let me make amends while I still can." "You really think you're going to prison?" "The EPA violations alone carry mandatory minimums. Add the fraud charges." Carl shrugged. "I've already started saying goodbye." Drew studied the man across from him. 2 weeks ago, Carl Turner had been untouchable, arrogant, dismissive, cruel in his casual indifference. Now he looked like what he actually was, An old man facing consequences for the first time in his privileged life. You don't get to make amends, Drew said quietly. Not with me. Not with Sophie. You made her feel worthless. You let her eat from trash. No amount of 11th hour regret changes that. I know. Then why are you really here? Carl's facade cracked completely. I'm here because I'm terrified. Not of prison or bankruptcy or losing everything. I'm terrified that I wasted my entire life chasing things that don't matter, and I'll die without my granddaughter ever knowing I realized it. That's not my problem. No, it's mine. Carl stood, left money for the coffee. For what it's worth, you're a better man than I ever was. Sophie's lucky to have you. He walked out without looking back. Drew sat alone at the table, watching through the window as Carl climbed into a modest sedan, the Porsche presumably already seized by federal investigators. He felt no satisfaction in the man's defeat, just exhaustion. His phone buzzed. Glenn Davies. You sitting down? Should I be? I just got word from my city planning contact. The zoning board vote is tomorrow night, not in 3 days. They moved it up to try to squeeze it through before Christmas. Can they do that? Technically, yes. They posted notice in the legal section of the newspaper. Most people don't read it. Drew's mind raced. Who's on the board? 7 members. Turner needs 4 votes to pass. He's got 3 in his pocket. Board members he's donated to for years. The other 4 could go either way. What would it take to sway them? Public pressure. Proof that the development would harm the community. Environmental impact data. A whole bunch of things that take time you don't have. Drew thought about the stacks of research in his home office. About the Riverside neighborhood, working-class families, small businesses, a community center that served hundreds of kids. About Sophie, and kids like her, who deserved better than rich men bulldozing their neighborhoods for profit. I need addresses for the board members. And the time of tomorrow's meeting. Drew, what are you planning? History lesson. The Turners are about to learn that revolutions don't need armies. They just need people who refuse to stay silent. Chapter 6. The zoning board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the municipal building's 3rd floor conference room. Public attendance was technically allowed but rarely happened. Zoning decisions were boring, technical, the domain of lawyers and developers. At 6:30 p.m., the 3rd floor was packed. Drew had spent the previous 24 hours making calls to residents of the Riverside district, to small business owners who'd be displaced, to environmental groups, to parents whose kids used the community center, to investigative journalists hungry for a follow-up to the Turner story. He'd reached out to his students, current and former, and asked them to spread the word on social media. The hashtag #SaveRiverside had trended locally by noon. Now, 200 people crammed into a space meant for 50. They lined the walls, sat on the floor, spilled into the hallway. The fire marshal looked ready to shut it down, but the crowd was peaceful, orderly, determined. Drew stood near the back with Sophie's hand in his. He'd brought her intentionally, dressed in her favorite dinosaur shirt. A visible reminder of who suffered when developers prioritized profit over people. The 7 board members looked shell-shocked as they took their seats. The chair, a thin man named Chester Lowe, banged his gavel. This meeting will come to order. We're here to vote on Petition Z, 2024-176, the Riverside redevelopment proposal submitted by Turner and Associates. A lawyer stood to present the Turner side. He was smooth, professional, armed with charts and economic projections. He spoke about job creation, tax revenue, urban renewal. The crowd listened in hostile silence. When he finished, Chester Lowe asked, "Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment?" 20 hands shot up. One by one, Riverside residents approached the microphone. An elderly woman whose family had owned a corner store for 40 years. A young father whose daughter attended after-school programs at the community center. A teacher who'd grown up in the neighborhood and watched it survive recessions and hardship through community strength. They spoke about the value of their homes, their businesses, their lives. They spoke about corporate greed and environmental damage and families displaced for profit. And they spoke about the Turners. This is the same family currently under federal investigation for environmental crimes, one resident said, voice shaking with anger. The same family that made a 6-year-old eat from garbage. And you're going to let them tear down our neighborhood. The crowd erupted in applause. Chester Lowe banged his gavel repeatedly. Order. We need order. Drew stepped to the microphone. Someone recognized him, and a murmur went through the room. My name is Drew Leon. I'm a high school history teacher and a father. 2 weeks ago, my daughter was humiliated by the Turner family because they considered her beneath them. Now they want to do the same thing to this entire neighborhood. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've spent the last week researching every development project Turner and Associates has completed in the past decade. In every case, they promised community benefits that never materialized. They promised environmental protections they ignored. They promised affordable housing they never built. He handed copies to the board members. This neighborhood doesn't need renewal. It needs protection from people who see communities as obstacles to profit. You have the power to provide that protection. Use it. Drew stepped back. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. The board members looked at each other, clearly unprepared for this level of public engagement. Chester Lowe called a 15-minute recess. In the hallway, a woman approached Drew. She had kind eyes and wore a Save Riverside t-shirt. You're really doing this for all of us. I'm doing it because it's right. The Turners destroyed your family. They tried. But families are tougher than buildings. Communities too. She hugged him, surprising them both. Thank you. When the board reconvened, Chester Lowe looked grim. After careful consideration and listening to public testimony, this board will postpone the vote on Petition Z 2024-176 for 60 days to allow for additional environmental review and community input. It wasn't a rejection, but it was a delay. And in the Turner family's current financial state, a delay was as good as a defeat. The crowd erupted in cheers. Drew felt Sophie's hand squeeze his. Did we win, Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. We won. Outside the municipal building, reporters swarmed Drew. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Mr. Leon, what does this mean for your custody battle? No comment. Are you satisfied with the board's decision? I'm satisfied that democracy worked. That ordinary people stood up to power and power blinked. What about Carl Turner's companies? They'll likely go bankrupt now. Drew paused. Looked directly at the nearest camera. I spent years teaching students that history is shaped by choices. The Turners chose greed over compassion, profit over people, appearance over substance. They're facing the consequences of those choices. I have no sympathy for that. Some people are calling you vindictive. Some people said the same thing about abolitionists and suffragettes and civil rights marchers. Change is never comfortable for those benefiting from the status quo. He picked up Sophie and walked to his car through the cheering crowd. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Drew sat in his office reading the formal settlement offer from Miranda's lawyers. She was agreeing to all his terms: primary custody to Drew, supervised visitation, child support, no contact with her parents until they completed therapy. There was a personal note attached in Miranda's handwriting. You were right. About everything. I don't know how to be the mother Sophie deserves, but I want to learn. Thank you for not giving up on her. Or me. M. Drew filed the papers in his desk drawer. He'd sign them tomorrow. His phone rang. Glenn Davies. Turner and Associates filed for bankruptcy an hour ago. The company's done. What about the criminal charges? EPA prosecution is moving forward. Carl's lawyer is negotiating a plea deal, probably 5 years minimum security. Margaret's not facing criminal charges, just civil penalties for her role in the company. But her family money is tied up in lawsuits from everyone they've defrauded over the years. Drew felt the weight of what he'd done settle over him. Lives destroyed. A family empire crumbled. He'd done what he set out to do. Why didn't it feel better? You okay? Glenn asked. I don't know. I wanted justice. I got revenge. I'm not sure they're the same thing. Hey, you exposed real crimes. You protected people. You saved a neighborhood. If the Turners suffer for that, it's not on you. Isn't it though? Glenn was quiet for a moment. You did what you had to do. Rest of us are just grateful someone finally stood up to them. After they hung up, Drew walked to Sophie's room. She was asleep, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, her face peaceful. He watched her breathe, thinking about Carl's words. I'm terrified that I wasted my entire life chasing things that don't matter. Drew had taught history for 15 years. He knew how these stories ended. The powerful fell. New powers rose. The cycle continued. But sometimes, just sometimes, ordinary people tipped the scales. Not through violence or grand gestures, but through simple refusal to accept injustice. He'd been one of those people. The cost was high. His marriage was over. His daughter's grandparents would go to prison. He'd made enemies who wouldn't forget. But Sophie was safe. And she'd grow up knowing her father fought for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. That was the lesson worth teaching. Chapter 7. The fallout came swiftly. On December 20th, Carl Turner accepted a plea deal. 6 years in federal prison for environmental crimes and fraud. Margaret avoided criminal charges but faced $30 million in civil penalties, effectively wiping out what remained of her family fortune. Turner and Associates' assets were liquidated to pay creditors and EPA fines. The Blackwood Hills mansion went on the market. The cars, the country club memberships, the carefully curated life of privilege, all of it disappeared like morning fog. But Drew wasn't thinking about the Turners when Christmas morning arrived. He was thinking about Sophie opening presents in her pajamas, squealing over a new set of books about dinosaurs, and a microscope he'd saved for months to buy. They'd decorated their small craftsman house with lights and a modest tree. Miranda had dropped off gifts the night before, her first visit without supervision, a milestone her therapist had approved. "Can we call Mom and say thank you?" Sophie asked, holding up a new art set. "Of course." Sophie ran to the phone, chattering excitedly when Miranda answered. Drew listened from the kitchen, making hot chocolate, feeling something unfamiliar. Hope. His phone buzzed. And Kingston, his agent. "Merry Christmas. Got news. Simon & Schuster is offering $200,000 for the Turner book. They want it fast, manuscript in 4 months." Drew nearly dropped his mug. $200,000. Plus a significant marketing budget. They think this story has massive appeal. David versus Goliath. Suburban dad takes down corrupt empire. All of it. I don't know if I can write it that fast. You're already halfway done. I've seen your drafts. Polish it. Add the recent developments. Write a strong conclusion. You can do this. After she hung up, Drew stood in his kitchen feeling dizzy. $200,000. Financial security. Sophie's college fund. A better house if they wanted it. But more than that, a platform. A way to tell the story properly, to explain why it mattered. He thought about all those history lessons he'd taught. About how change happened through documentation, through bearing witness, through refusing to let the powerful control the narrative. This was his chance to do that on a larger scale. He called Cody McConnell. "I need your advice on something." "Shoot. If I write this book, tell this whole story publicly, will it hurt the custody agreement?" "You mean will Miranda try to back out?" "Yeah." Cody was quiet for a moment. "Depends on how you write it. If you focus on the Turners' crimes and your fight for Sophie, you're probably fine. If you make Miranda the villain, she might lawyer up again. What if I tell the truth? That she was a victim of her family too, in a different way? Then you'll probably be okay." "What?" Drew watched Sophie through the doorway, carefully arranging her new art supplies. "Because it's the right thing to do. And I'm tired of fighting. I want to build something instead. Write the book. Just be fair. You're good at that." New Year's Eve found Drew at his computer, working on Chapter 12. Sophie was at Miranda's apartment, her first overnight visit. The therapist had recommended it, and Drew had agreed despite his anxiety. Miranda had called twice to update him. Sophie was fine. They'd made dinner together, watched movies, laughed. "She's really amazing, Drew," Miranda said during the second call. "I know I'm her mother, but sometimes I forget how incredible she is. She gets it from you. The good parts." Silence on the line. Then, "Thank you for saying that. For not making me the monster in all this. You're not a monster. You're someone who got lost. We all do sometimes." After they hung up, Drew returned to his manuscript. He was writing about the night he'd found Sophie in the kitchen, but he was being careful. He described Margaret's cruelty, Carl's indifference, the system that enabled their behavior. But when he wrote about Miranda, he wrote about a woman trapped between two worlds, trying to please everyone and losing herself in the process. He wrote, "My wife was not the villain of this story. She was a casualty of it. The Turners destroyed more than my marriage. They destroyed their own daughter's sense of self-worth, teaching her from birth that value came from external validation rather than internal character." It was true, and writing it felt like letting go of the last of his anger. At midnight, fireworks exploded outside. Drew stepped onto his porch, watching colors bloom against the dark sky. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Carl Turner. I'm writing from a supervised phone at the federal facility. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know. I read the preliminary articles about your book. What you wrote about Margaret and me, it's more fair than we deserve. Thank you for that. And thank you for protecting Sophie. You're a better man than I could ever be. KT. Drew read it twice, then deleted it. Some bridges burned for good reason. But he appreciated the acknowledgement. It meant the message had been received. Actions have consequences, even for the powerful. Especially for the powerful. In February, Drew got word that the EPA prosecution had resulted in additional charges. 2 executives from Turner and Associates who'd actively participated in falsifying environmental reports were facing trial. Margaret was being sued by 3 neighborhood associations for damages. And Austin Turner, Miranda's younger brother, had fled to the Cayman Islands to avoid subpoenas. The empire wasn't just fallen. It was shattered. Drew was meeting with his publicist, an efficient woman named Julia Collins, when the news broke. "This is perfect timing," Julia said, scrolling through her tablet. "Your book drops in 6 weeks. This keeps the story in the news cycle. I'm not celebrating people going to prison. I know. But the public is. You're the hero in this narrative. The ordinary dad who exposed systemic corruption. Own it." Drew shifted uncomfortably. "I just wanted to protect my daughter. And you did. By exposing the truth. That's heroic whether you want to admit it or not." The book tour was scheduled for March and April. 20 cities, interviews with major media, speaking engagements at universities. Drew had negotiated for Sophie to come with him when possible, turning it into an adventure rather than leaving her behind. "Daddy, are we really going to New York?" Sophie asked when he told her. "We really are. Want to see the Natural History Museum? The one with the dinosaurs? The biggest dinosaur collection in the world." Sophie threw her arms around his neck. "This is the best thing ever." Miranda had agreed to adjust the custody schedule to accommodate the tour. She'd gotten a job working for a nonprofit, using her business degree for the first time, helping low-income families navigate housing assistance programs. "It's ironic," she'd said when she told Drew. "My parents spent millions on commercial real estate while people went homeless. Now I'm helping the people they ignored. How does it feel? Like I'm finally doing something that matters." They were becoming friends, slowly. Co-parents first, but with genuine respect growing between them. Sophie noticed and bloomed in the warmth of it. "You and Mom don't fight anymore," she observed one day. "We grew up," Drew said simply. "Grammy and Grandpa didn't grow up." "No, they didn't. That's sad." It was. Despite everything, it was sad. Chapter 8. The book released on March 15th to immediate critical acclaim. Teaching Justice, How One Father Exposed an Empire, debuted at number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list. By the second week, it had climbed to number 3. Reviews praised Drew's measured tone, his refusal to sensationalize, his ability to weave personal narrative with broader social critique. The Washington Post wrote, "Drew Leon has crafted a devastating portrait of privilege unchecked and the cost of silence. This is essential reading for anyone who believes ordinary people can't fight power and win." But the most satisfying review came from a smaller source, a blog called Teachers Who Write. "As an educator myself, I'm proud that one of our own showed the world what it means to stand up for what's right. Leon didn't need wealth or connections. He needed integrity and courage. This book proves that the best heroes are often the ones who never wanted to be heroes at all." Drew read that review to his 10th grade history class. They erupted in applause. "Mr. Leon, you're famous," one student shouted. "I'm a teacher who wrote a book. Not quite the same thing. You took down evil rich people. That's pretty famous." Drew smiled. "I exposed the truth. Other people did the rest." After class, his principal, Dr. Harris, stopped by his classroom. "I've had 3 school districts call asking if you'd be interested in administrative positions. One offered $60,000 more than you make now." Drew looked around his classroom, the walls covered in student projects, quotes from Howard Zinn and Harriet Tubman, maps of revolutions throughout history. "I'm good here." "You sure?" "The book money alone." "The book money goes into Sophie's college fund and a down payment on a slightly less old car. I like teaching. It's what I do." Dr. Harris smiled. "We're lucky to have you." But the attention wasn't all positive. Margaret Turner's remaining supporters, wealthy friends who believed the whole scandal was exaggerated, launched a whisper campaign against Drew. They called him opportunistic, vengeful, a social climber who'd used his daughter for profit. One particularly nasty op-ed in a conservative publication accused him of weaponizing child welfare for personal gain and suggested the Thanksgiving incident had been fabricated. Drew was composing a response when Joan Elliott called him. I saw that article. It's bullshit. I was there. I saw everything. I know. Thanks, Joan. No, you don't understand. I've been contacted by 5 other families, former Turner and Associates employees and contractors. They all have stories about Carl and Margaret's treatment of workers, subcontractors, anyone they considered beneath them. They want to go public. Drew's pulse quickened. Why now? Because of your book. You gave them permission to speak up. You showed them it was possible to tell the truth and survive. Within a week, a class action lawsuit was filed against the remains of Turner and Associates. 23 plaintiffs alleging workplace abuse, wage theft, and discriminatory practices. The Whisper campaign evaporated overnight. Drew wasn't celebrating. More pain, more legal battles, more lives disrupted. But he was grimly satisfied that the full scope of the Turners' behavior was finally being documented. Truth had momentum. Once it started rolling, it was hard to stop. The book tour was grueling but rewarding. Drew spoke at bookstores and universities, at community centers, and teacher conferences. Sophie came to several events, sitting in the front row drawing pictures while he answered questions. In Boston, a woman stood up during Q&A. My husband's family treated me the way the Turners treated you. I've been afraid to leave. Your book gave me courage. Thank you. In Chicago, a man approached afterward. I'm a public school teacher like you. I thought I'd never amount to much in my family's eyes. You proved that doing the right thing matters more than status or money. That means everything. These moments sustained Drew through the exhaustion and scrutiny. In New York, they visited the Natural History Museum as promised. Sophie stood beneath the towering dinosaur skeleton, her neck craned back, eyes wide with wonder. Daddy, that's a brachiosaurus. How do you know? Because I read. You taught me reading is important. Drew laughed, feeling joy bubble up unexpectedly. This was what mattered, not bestseller lists or media appearances, but teaching his daughter to be curious, brave, kind. That evening, Miranda joined them for dinner. She'd flown in from their home city, wanting to see Sophie during the tour. They sat in a pizza place in Brooklyn, Sophie between them, chattering about dinosaurs and skyscrapers and everything she'd seen. Miranda caught Drew's eye across the table. Mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded. They were okay. Not married, not in love anymore, but okay. That was enough. On the final stop of the tour, Seattle, Drew was surprised by a visitor backstage before his reading. Glenn Davies. What are you doing here? Flew out to tell you in person. The EPA case wrapped up. All defendants found guilty. Carl Turner's sentence stands. The 2 executives got 8 years each. And Margaret? Civil penalties upheld. She's bankrupt. Completely. Drew should have felt victorious. Instead, he just felt tired. There's more, Glenn said. The Riverside neighborhood? The community center you helped save? They want to name their new library wing after you. What? No. That's too late. Already voted on. The Drew Leon Learning Center opens in June. Drew sat down heavily in a folding chair. That's too much. That's gratitude. You saved their neighborhood. Let them honor that. After the reading, a local reporter asked Drew what was next. Next, I go home. I teach my classes. I'm working on a second book about grassroots activism through history. And I'm going to keep being Sophie's dad. That's the plan. No political ambitions. People have suggested you run for school board, even city council. Drew laughed. I'm a teacher, not a politician. I just want to help kids learn to think critically and stand up for what's right. You've become a symbol. I'm not a symbol. I'm a guy who did what any good parent would do, protected his kid. If that's inspiring to people, great. But I'm not running for office or starting a movement. I'm going home. And he meant it. Fame was fleeting. Justice was messy. But family, the one you chose, the one you built through love and effort, that was real. That was worth fighting for. Chapter 9. 6 months after the book's release, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Drew taught his classes, worked on the second book, spent weekends with Sophie hiking and exploring museums. Miranda had moved into a modest apartment and continued her work with the nonprofit. She and Drew had developed an effective co-parenting relationship built on respect and Sophie's well-being. Sophie, now 7, was thriving. She'd made new friends at school, joined the science club, and developed a passionate interest in paleontology. She talked about being a scientist when she grew up, like the people who study dinosaur bones. Drew asked, "Exactly. I want to discover a new species and name it after you. Druosaurus leonis. I'm honored. It would be a nice dinosaur. One that protected smaller dinosaurs from mean ones. Drew hugged her tight. That's the best dinosaur I can imagine. In June, the Drew Leon Learning Center officially opened in Riverside. Drew attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony with Sophie, feeling overwhelmed by the turnout. The neighborhood had transformed the old community center into a state-of-the-art library and learning space, funded partly by settlement money from the Turner lawsuits and partly by community fundraising. Children ran through the bright, welcoming space. Parents browsed books. Teachers led workshops. Chester Lowe, the zoning board chair, approached Drew with a smile. You see what you made possible? The community made this possible. I just helped them be heard. Same thing. Maybe it was. Drew was still learning to accept that his actions had rippled outward, creating changes he'd never anticipated. Sophie tugged his hand. Daddy, there's a section for dinosaur books. Can we get a library card? Absolutely. They filled out the paperwork together, Sophie carefully writing her name. When the librarian handed her the card, she stared at it reverently. My very own library card for the Learning Center, named after my dad. The librarian smiled. Your dad's pretty special. I know, Sophie said simply. He's the best. Later that month, Drew received an unexpected letter. It was from Carl Turner, postmarked from the Federal Correctional Facility. He almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Dear Drew, I'm writing this from prison, a sentence I never imagined typing. I've had a lot of time to think about the choices that led me here. About the man I was and the man I should have been. I want you to know I've been following your book's success. I've read it 3 times. Each time, I'm struck by your fairness, your refusal to demonize people who deserve demonizing. You wrote about Margaret and me as flawed humans who made terrible choices, not monsters. That grace is something I didn't expect and don't deserve. I've also been following Sophie's life through the occasional updates Miranda sends Margaret. She's brilliant, curious, kind, everything a grandfather should be proud of. I'll never get the chance to know her. I've accepted that. But I wanted you to know that watching her grow from a distance, knowing she has a father who will protect her and teach her to value substance over appearance, brings me more peace than I deserve. You were right. About everything. History judges empires by their fall. I built mine on sand and arrogance. It collapsed exactly as it should have. But you built something real. A daughter who will change the world in small, important ways. A book that's inspiring people to demand better from those in power. A legacy that actually matters. Thank you for teaching me that lesson, even though I learned it far too late. Carl Turner. Drew folded the letter carefully and put it in his desk drawer. He wasn't sure how he felt about it. Forgiveness wasn't something he was ready for. Maybe never would be. But acknowledgement mattered. Knowing that Carl understood the magnitude of what he'd done, what he'd lost, that counted for something. On Sophie's 8th birthday, Drew threw a party in their backyard. Neighborhood kids came, along with some of Sophie's classmates. Miranda helped with decorations. Glenn and Cody stopped by with gifts. They played games, ate cakes shaped like a triceratops, and laughed until the summer sun set. As the party wound down and parents collected their children, Sophie climbed into Drew's lap on the porch swing. Best birthday ever, Daddy. I'm glad, sweetheart. Did Grammy and Grandpa send anything? Drew hesitated. Margaret had sent a card with a check, money from somewhere, though Drew couldn't imagine where given her financial situation. He'd put it directly into Sophie's college fund without mentioning it. They're thinking of you, he said carefully, but they're dealing with some grown-up problems right now, because they were mean and broke rules. Yes. Sophie nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Chun says everyone makes mistakes, but you have to fix them if you want people to forgive you. Mrs. Chun is very wise. Have they fixed their mistakes? Drew looked at his daughter, so young, yet already grasping concepts some adults never learned. They're trying, but some mistakes take a long time to fix. Maybe forever. Oh, Sophie snuggled closer. I'm glad you never made mistakes like that. I've made plenty of mistakes, sophomore. The difference is I try to learn from them and do better. That's what makes you a good daddy. Drew felt his throat tighten. You make it easy. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Drew thought about the past year. About everything that had changed and everything that had stayed the same. He destroyed an empire, written a best-selling book, become a symbol of ordinary resistance to extraordinary power. But more importantly, He'd protected his daughter, taught her that standing up for what's right matters more than fitting in with the powerful, shown her through example that love and integrity beat money and status every single time. The Turner Empire was gone. Carl was in prison. Margaret was bankrupt. Their legacy was one of corruption and cruelty exposed. Drew's legacy would be Sophie. And kids like her, learning in the Drew Leon Learning Center that knowledge was power and kindness was strength. That was the victory that mattered. That was the revolution worth fighting. Miranda came out onto the porch, carrying leftover cake. She asleep? Drew looked down. Sophie had dozed off against his chest, her breathing soft and steady. Just now, Miranda sat beside them, quiet for a moment. Then, you know what I realized? You won. Not just against my family. You won at life. You're happy. You're respected. You've made a difference. And you did it all by being exactly who you've always been. I didn't do it to win. I know. That's why you did. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching fireflies blink in the darkness, while Sophie slept peacefully, safe, loved, and free from the weight of other people's expectations. In the end, that was all Drew had ever wanted. And against all odds, he'd gotten it. The fight was over. The war was won, not through violence or vengeance, but through truth, courage, and the quiet determination of an ordinary man who refused to let his daughter be diminished. History would remember the Turners as a cautionary tale, but Drew Leon would be remembered as something better, a father who loved his daughter enough to change the world for her. That was enough. That was everything. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.